January 27, 2014, this meeting of the Planning Board is formally called to order. I note for those in attendance, for my colleagues on the board, we are going to be televised tonight through HCAM. First item on the agenda, welcome back our friends from MAPC. We have Jennifer and Joe with us tonight, so thank you for coming back. We're going to review the draft goals and receive some additional public input from the various meetings and forums about what we've been discussing on our master plan discussion throughout the fall. So let me turn it over right now to Jennifer and Joe.
Great. Thank you very much. I'm short. Thank you all for coming out tonight, for inviting us to be here. I know you have other things on the agenda, so we'll try to get through the business and leave plenty of time for input from the board and from the audience. So we're here, this is the last of our official meetings with the Planning Board on the Hingham Master Plan update. We're doing this work with the town under a Sustainable Communities grant, which was from HUD, and we're wrapping up a number of projects related to that grant. It was a $60,000 grant with a match of $15,000 from the town. We've worked very closely with Mary Dunham, your Director of Community Planning, and that's been a very fruitful relationship. So we really appreciate Mary's help and all the interest from the Planning Board. So I just want to go over quickly tonight's agenda. We'll be recapping the project very briefly, talking about the criteria we use to update the master plan goals. We'll walk you through the overview of those goals, and project. There's some other related tasks that we'll talk about. We'll be assessing the Hingham goals against the regional development plan, which is called Metro Future. I'll just be quickly walking through what's in the final report, which is in draft form, and then we'll talk a little bit about what the next steps are to wrap this up. So as I said, it was a Sustainable Communities grant from HUD. The purpose was to do a very extensive outreach public participation process to review and either affirm the goals for the 2001 master plan or to update them as may be necessary. And we also did some modeling of alternative future scenarios. I know many of you came to one of the two workshops we had, October and November. So these were the specific tasks in the scope of work. So the project to date, from May to November, we had a series of 12 public meetings. Some of them were planning board forums that were held here on regular Monday night planning board nights. Mary also helped us set up some additional meetings. We met at the Senior Center, and Mary did some additional outreach to the Industrial Commission and some other groups. We also put together an online survey that ran from May through July. We got a very impressive 380 responses, and we took that into account as well. And then October and November, we had two major workshops in which we ran some alternative scenarios for primarily the Hingham Shipyard and South Hingham. And this is work that Metropolitan Area Planning Council has been doing with other communities to try to assess the potential for development, a number of different development types. So there's a lot more information about the survey in the final draft report, but I just wanted to show here what came up as the top 5 strengths and the top 5 challenges. I don't think they're probably much of a surprise to anybody, but we wanted to sort of keep coming back to what we were hearing from residents to make sure that we understood what the town's priorities were. So these scenario planning workshops, we were very pleased with the attendance. We showed a lot of maps, a lot of graphs and statistics, and again, we put much of this in the appendices of the report. But the purpose was to take some areas and to come up with 3 different scenarios. What if you developed primarily office development? What if you had mixed use with office and housing in a particular area. The software, modeling software we use takes into account what's already there, what the zoning is, what additional development could be generated, and then gives you some opportunity to think about what the impacts of those different scenarios might be on number of school children, water usage, sewer, traffic generation, tax base, that kind of thing. So when we set out to update the goals, and again, as I said, that was the major task that we were asked to undertake. The master plan is a terrific document. It really are to be congratulated. Not everybody in the community has a master plan, and but because master plans are living documents, the town wisely decided that they wanted to just take a look at the goals and potentially update them. So before we set out on this process, we put out a series of criteria that we would use to update the goals and work with Mary to make sure that those criteria were relevant. So what we really wanted to do, first of all, is there is legislation pending. It has a long history. House Bill 1859. It's basically to reform the zoning enabling legislation in Massachusetts. And this has been an effort that's been underway for a long time. So if this were to pass, and again, there's no guarantee, it would be the new legislation under which a community would do a master plan. It wouldn't mean that your master plan wasn't still your master plan, but if you were to do another one under this bill, they have required and optional elements of a master plan. So we tried to format looking at the goals and analyzing the goals with an eye towards that, because that is kind of the way current thinking is going on what's important in the master plan, what's useful in the master plan. There are new issues that have evolved over the past 5 years or so, things like energy and public health that are addressed in this potential zoning reform act. So we took a look at that. We also found in looking at the goals in your plan that some of them had general goals and then specific goals. Some just had general goals. Some had recommendations. So we really wanted to get a consistent hierarchy so that there wouldn't be confusion about what were the overarching statements of the town's intent. We also looked to see if there was duplication, try to put, concepts or goal statements that could possibly belong to several different categories in the most relevant place, so that you're not duplicating. And also to recommend any new goals based on what we've heard through all this public participation, the survey results, best practices that we see other communities doing, and as I said, the potential requirements of a new zoning reform act. We also just wanted to clarify meaning in places where we felt it might be a little confusing, and delete goals that you've already accomplished. Let's take a look at that. So those were the criteria. There are many, many different ways. 10 people in my office could write 10 different sets of goals. There are just many ways to word these, but we took our best shot at clarifying and reordering and simplifying some of these. We added some energy goals based on the work that your town energy committee, because this would be a required element under the new House bill. And it's also just an important area for communities to address. It's up there on the list of new concerns that communities have. The Community Preservation Act, of course, which you adopted, we made sure that showed up in all the different spending categories that are allowable, not just under open space. And we've also updated the housing goals to reflect some of the statewide and regional emphasis on producing housing. It's a major thrust now in the Commonwealth, and some additional fair housing goals. So what we had that one more question we wanted to put up here.
Yes.
Which was, do you remember?
Yeah, you want to go ahead.
Yeah, all right, we had one more bullet point we added, and I forgot to load it off my thumb drive. So first of all, do you have any questions about the new master plan goals, the hierarchy that we've established, goals and objectives, or the criteria that we use to make these edits? We wanted to make sure we captured the town's primary master planning goals, didn't leave anything out. And of the goals represented in this update, are there any that we just didn't accurately represent, or any that are no longer relevant? And
The last one was if you would want to have a continuation and further study of any goals and sort of refinement, therefore, of any of those goals. Or the discussion that we've had offline is whether or not you're interested in exploring or pursuing a public health element to your master plan. That would be a whole separate study or section of the plan. So those are the kinds of things that we wanted to know tonight so that we can take that under consideration in the implementation piece.
so with that, I'll just get a copy of, before we go any further, this one-page survey. This is one of the I guess you'd call it requirements, although it is optional, under the Sustainable Communities Act. HUD wants to see who has been coming to our meetings. How good has our outreach been? How many people are they representative of the community? Completely anonymous, and many of you probably filled this out before, but if you could just take a moment and do it one last time, we would be very grateful to you. So with these questions in mind, and your handout shows our updated goals, and then in the gray box, what was originally the text in your master plan. And in many cases, the goals will seem a lot more succinct and fewer. What we tried to do is also, in some of the goals where you may list, for instance, in open space, protection, all the different landscape types that you want to protect, we tried to make that broader and not so much of laundry list. So they may look shrunk down, but if you compare, I believe that we've kept all the major concepts in there. And goals are meant to be broad, objectives are meant to tell you how you would accomplish those goals, and then obviously the recommendations are far more specific action items that would get you to those goals. So we'll just open it up to the board and ask any questions or any comments things that you jotted down.
Well, Bill, do you want to just go all over the place, or should we?
So, may I?
Yeah.
So a couple things. One is we had hoped to have about maybe a 30 to 40 minute conversation about this. Then I think there's actually a couple more slides about sort of the next steps and implementation. One of those next steps, just because we're talking about goals now, is that if you have a lot of comments that you want to share with us, we were hoping to actually channel through Mary to get any feedback, I think by February 10th was our hope. So that it would enable you and I suppose anybody else, we will provide the document electronically so that we can get any of that feedback, and then I can make refinements to the document and provide it back to you by February 14th, Friday.
So would it be useful to hear from the board first any major disparities?
Yeah, to kind of follow the questions that are up here would be helpful if you have sort of a typographical or word change kind of that are not content-driven kind of comments. I think those would be best provided in writing, or by email. Right. Through the comment process. Otherwise, we would love to have the content kinds of, and I think the big one is actually the first one is if you are comfortable with the hierarchy that we've put forth, which is kind of fundamental to kind of the backbone for moving forward. And then if there's agreement on that, then I feel comfortable answering some of the other questions, I think, because that's shaping how we're doing this. And it's very different than the way you had outlined and formatted your existing master plan. And the goals, of course, is sort of the backbone for whatever you do next when you do that. And so I want to make sure that there's some agreement on that formatting. I think that's important. I know you can make changes to it, and I'm not saying you won't, but I would like to know that first.
If I may too, what she's referring to is the format is merged towards if the Zoning Reform Act were adopted in its current status, then you would need to have a master plan that fell in line with that legislation. And the way that this is being formatted now would position you for that instead of having to redo it in the future. Now that doesn't, of course that's not adopted now, but it sets you up for that with a couple of, there's a couple of gaps in it. So that's part of why it looks a little bit different, and that's up to you to decide if you want to move forward with that new framework.
There's only gaps in it that would relate to optional elements of the potential zoning reform. We met all of the required, that's why we added the energy goals. So we met all the minimum requirements, but if you wanted anything optional, then that's where you would go later. The other part of the hierarchy that I was talking about is in your current master plan's goals, a lot of them have bullet points and action items and recommendations, and so what we've done is, in many cases, we've taken those out and we've made it into a goal statement rather than bulleted recommendations, action items, if you would. So that's where I'm hoping to gain some agreement that that's okay.
And can you talk a little bit about that? In a master plan, having goals is the intent, and sort of the tactics are not meant to be included in the master plan?
They would be in there, but they would be your next step. And specifically to have to get to the point of having an implementation plan that says, this is achieving the broader goal of whatever it might be, land use preservation. And then here's how we're going to do that. We're going to preserve X parcel or these types of parcels. And then these are the types of people in town or committees or commissions who are going to do that. And then this is the funding that we will use to get that done. As an example of sort of getting to an implementation strategy, everything's sort of consolidated right now in your current master plan, and it's not always clear who the people are who are implementing the plan. You'd have to read.
Would that be a separate document?
No, that would be like a next chapter.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's also
Not in here. It is not in here, no.
important to separate two different elements. One is
Right.
the work that MAPC was doing with the town was on the goals. It
It's
was
just a
not
beginning.
on recommendations or the total format of
Right.
the content. It was only the goals. So obviously, there are lots of recommendations which, depending on how you decide to go forward, you might, each chapter, for instance, housing, would have your goals and objectives, as they finally fall out. And then you would go back and look to see what recommendations specifically fall under those goals and objectives, and possibly do some reordering. That's not necessary, but our only real task was to update the goals, not the recommendations.
So in our earlier master plan, the last approved master plan, we had general goals, which were overview goals, and then we had specific goals. And I'm seeing that a number of the general goals have changed. It seems also in the original master plan, there were a lot of really good general goals that I'm thinking perhaps we should continue to include, but perhaps amend, maybe rather than replace.
What we did, first of all, the consistent hierarchy, for instance, the transportation chapter didn't have goals at all. It just went right to a series of recommendations.
I realize that, yeah.
So, but I think it's very hard. I mean, I appreciate the difficulty that you might have in sort of going, trying to compare apples to oranges, because I was very careful when I rewrote these goals and wrote objectives to make sure that I was not leaving out any major concepts.
Mm-hmm.
You might have said, 7 different types of landscape features, and I just said, to correct a variety of, the typical landscapes of Hingham, where there were lists, bulleted lists enumerating a variety of things. If there was a catchphrase that I could put them under, that's how I handle it. So I don't think that, and that's one of the, the second bullet point. I'm comfortable that I didn't leave out any major concepts. They may not look the way that they look in these gray boxes, which is your original text. But I think if there's something that you think is missing, we can probably go back and show you how we believe that it's actually there, under one of the goal statements. But I realize that's a little tricky to finesse.
We just receiving this, the first time to look at this, which is a nice document, it's very thorough. One of the areas that I'm thinking of, for example, is that a number of the different areas in the summary here talk about essentially maintaining the character of the town, but also encouraging new growth, and which is a very proactive way of looking at things. But part of that is, promoting quality design, for example. So there would be design, the whole concept of design review, which, if I'm understanding the new zoning act, the idea, the goal of the new zoning act is to basically have the town's zoning bylaw be more in concert with the master plan.
Right.
And so if we're talking about, for example, that, we have certain restrictions and certain opportunities on that. So I was thinking of, in looking at some of the general goals, just reading this for the first time, that was the first thing that caught my eye, is how do we basically elaborate on that in a general way and also in a more specific way. And I think I had a chance to, starting to read this, I'm seeing where you're picking up on that. But there are a lot of very general 10-year long-term goals, on the economic development side of things. But then there's the issue of the balance of, dealing with the current zoning areas, the current constraints, these new opportunities. And I'm looking at a method of how one actually goes and reviews that. I mean, there's a goal to do it, but in the current structure of the town, in the town boards, right now, the only board that does design review is the Historic Districts Commission, for example, and none of the other boards do design review. So just as a question as to how would we take that very valid goal and take it to the next step, I'm just looking through to see how we might have commented on that.
Right. Well, again, that's getting more into the recommendation level, which is the part that we weren't asked to look at. One thing, when we get to the implementation steps, we provided in the final document links to some of the work that MAPC has done in these areas, and we certainly are able to offer additional technical assistance. But those are a different level of effort and kind of a different task. And I think Mary will speak to that later when we're talking more about next steps. But none of the action recommendations or anything specific is lost. It's still in your plan because we haven't, tampered with any of the content chapters.
Yes, it's right. The board still has it here, and so with some updating, it's still part of the plan.
Just to point out that the land use, under land use goals, the first goal, number 2, I guess the question is, do you feel that number 2, which is promote quality design, and then there's 2 sub-goals listed, do you feel that's enough or adequate to convey what you needed to convey in support of what you've just mentioned related to your zoning code and therefore the design review process? And if it's not, then what else do we need to capture in this goal statement or statements that would adequately address your concerns? I know you're looking at it for the first time. So again, that's kind of the lens that if you do kind of take a step back and look at the document when you're able to provide the detailed feedback.
Yeah, I think it would be good to have some time to think about it and put together some, okay.
May I ask a quick
Sure.
Sort of structural question? First of all, can you go over the difference between goals, objectives, and recommendations one more time?
Sure. The goals are sort of the overarching vision, if you will, what you want to see, happen in the future, what's important to the town. So balanced growth is a goal, quality design is a goal. Underneath the goals, the objectives break it down a little bit more. So what's involved with balanced growth? Balanced growth means, that you've got economic benefits balanced against the need to protect historic resources and the character of the town. So that's one element of the overarching goal of balanced growth. Another one is high-quality development in South Hingham and the Hingham Shipyard. So that's getting a little bit more specific, but it's recognizing that those are two areas where, growth and development are likely to happen. And balance also could be, increasing the amount of protected open space. So we're trying to come up with all the things that might contribute to balanced growth. Then a recommendation might be, under, for instance, the first one is, you might get more specific about the need to expand historic districts, or, what type of tax base increases you're looking for. But those would be more action-oriented.
The other, just clarifying, the other thing about objectives is they would maybe help you to measure your progress. So they would actually have numbers related to, if you're interested in preservation, then if there's some metrics that you're looking at in terms of the amount of open space or the number of acres, that would be something that you would also put into an objective.
So is that 1.3, is that an objective?
Well,
yes.
it may be. There's a couple things here
My
that.
little note was by how much? I mean, that's like a specific.
Well, another part that gets sort of complicated when you're looking at master plan versus, for instance, you have an open space and recreation plan. That's more specific. That's a very appropriate place for that level of detail. How much protected open space? How much more might you want? So that's a very specific plan. So some of these elements have contributing plans or documents or initiatives from which you could take the detail, the richness of what needs to happen next.
Where does implementation now fall into those three goals, objectives, recommendations? Is that after recommendations, you work on a plan to implement?
Right, the recommendation might be, acquire parcel X, protect parcel X for open space. And then the implementation step might be, which board, is it going to be a CPA purchase? Is it a agricultural preservation restriction? What's the method, and who spearheads that effort? So is this a conservation commission, CPA committee? That's the level of detail of where you get into the actions, recommendations, and implementation.
But if we just stay on this open space thing as an example, since the time the 2001 master plan was written, where the goal was increase the amount of protected open space, Hingham has increased the amount
Right.
of open space. And at what point does Hingham get to the point where the increase is no longer, it's a maintain? Or are we forever increasing? Are we trying
Yeah.
to say that we as a town prefer open space to commercial tax base?
Right.
I don't know what the answer
Well,
is.
yeah,
but
and
I
that-
think it needs to be a little more
that
clear than this,
that objective
because this
could be
continuing
clarified.
to increase seems
Yeah.
like an elusive goal.
Right. But many of the goals from which, the ones in the gray boxes are also not particularly quantified. And the idea is really what are the key, you might still have the goal of increasing the amount of protected open space. It's unlikely that you'll be achieving overprotection anytime soon. But the open space plan, you could go back to your open space plan where many people probably spent many, many hours, drilling down into the details. What are the top 3 parcels that they want to protect, or what are the reasons? So then I would go to that plan, if, not that we'll be doing that, but to look at what is the number, or what is the quantification of that objective.
So you actually have 31%, is my understanding, is protected open space, which is the highest on the South Shore, one of the highest in our region, which is fantastic, I might add, especially since it's permanently protected. But maybe there are still parcels that are contiguous parcels or important parcels related to, special areas, critical areas of concern or other things of that nature that I don't know enough about, and I don't know if Joan, you would know enough about through the open space protection plan, but maybe this isn't the right way to say that, but you want to say it in some way to certainly talk about the importance of protected open space. It is clearly has been something of importance and still needs to be maintained and
I mean, it seems to me
conserved.
we have a number of items that are in these individual goals. For example, protecting open space, but also looking at the balance of protecting the aquifer in an area which is also slated for further commercial development. So we have to balance these three constraints. We've listed them as individual priorities and constraints,
Well,
but there's also
yeah.
a series that have to be balanced so that we don't lose one and at the gain of the other.
This is also one of the tricky parts of trying to go through this exercise, because if you go down to, let's say, page 5 in that handout, we do get more specific under natural resources. So, what's open space versus what's natural resources and energy, what belongs in what chapter. So I tried to look at the guidance from the zoning reform bill and sort of see, okay, well, this is what they're considering under natural resources, so maybe some of the concepts that might have been in the open space section or in the land use belong more specifically. So there it talks about, protect additional land of all types to sustain viable populations of native plant and wildlife species. That's a little bit more specific. You might want to put that in land use, probably not, but maybe that should also be cross-referenced in the open space. I mean, that's one way of handling it. And these are some more objectives for how you manage natural resources. But natural resources, open space, I mean, there's a fine line, so it has to go somewhere. So as long as you go back and tick off, what do you think the key concepts are and find them here, I think that's really what we're hoping to find out, that we've, done a good job of that.
It also seems that in some of the goals that were stated for the harbor and the waterfront is that it was to protect it as an open space, but also also manage development adjacent. I don't know if you've captured that on the natural resources or the water resources. Because I always thought that the idea was to have leisure, any improvements there were more for leisure types of passive recreational uses, but managing the open space was also in that context. So I don't know how that relates to, it's an overlap between the natural resources and the water resources, how you would word that.
Right, and I think the main thing is, if it's a key concept, a key goal, we need to see that it has a home. It's less important whether it's open space or natural resources, but we can certainly move objectives, and maybe they fall under a different goal, make more sense that way.
Can you explain to me sort of what the Metro future goals are, where those come from? I mean, I read a little bit about it, but maybe you can give
Should I jump ahead to that slide, or?
Would you mind if
Waiting?
we wait
Yeah,
to get to that?
we'll definitely go through that.
Let's just stick
Yeah.
with the goals, your goals for the town,
Okay.
if you don't mind.
Nope. I
Okay.
don't.
But we will definitely get to that, Sarah.
Yeah, that's the next.
All right, and I had
piece.
one question on one of the earlier slides of the challenges, top 5 challenges. It said elected officials. So can you tell-
That,
I didn't say that.
I know. When you
run, or the quality of the elected officials.
when you do, I'm trying to remember back to how we worded the survey questions. Obviously, this is a response, some kind of a response to a survey question, and I could take a look. But we may have said something about what are the, I think we worded challenge, strengths and challenges, and that probably was one of the selections. I don't know specifically what the 380 people who, responded specifically meant by that. We also had some open-ended questions, which you have to be very careful in a survey when you ask too many open-ended questions, because you get a lot of very open-ended responses. But I wouldn't take too much, I wouldn't take that to heart. I think your elected officials and
I think that was one of those selection.
Right.
Pick your top 5.
Yeah.
For the strengths or weaknesses.
It's in your appendix, in the master plan document, but it was an option. Which of the following best describes Hingham's greatest challenges? Select all that apply. So,
Okay.
one of them was elected officials. However, there is an other category that has, it looks like 82 responses, so we'd be happy to go in that and see if there's further information. That's not included in this appendix, so I can take a look at that and see what information we can find.
Yeah, survey responses, the open-ended ones, the comments were kind of all over the place. And another thing is you have half the town contradicting the other half of the town in terms of, preservation, or economic development to enhance the tax base. Obviously, as planning board
So
members,
how do
you
you,
run into that.
how do these goals reflect that? Because if we sat with 10 people, 5 would say, oh my
sure.
gosh, 31%, that's
Right.
terrible, we need to get to 50%, and another half would say, oh my gosh, where's your commercial tax base? We need
Right.
jobs and we need, other revenue.
We
in this
didn't
town."
really base any of the rewrite of the goals directly on the survey. We started with a very good set of goals that you'd given a lot of thought to, obviously, and then using those criteria, we tweaked them a little bit, but we didn't go back over the survey and say, whoa, 60% of people wanted more tax base, therefore we're going to, emphasize that goal. Because it's really not a scientific survey, and the numbers, whereas they're interesting, have to be taken with a grain of salt.
I would just also defer to your current open space recreation plan, because that would give you the best understanding of what you have in terms of preserving or creating new or whatever it might be in terms of open space recreation opportunities. And so if, I'm not saying that 31% is enough or is not enough.
Right.
I don't think we're trying to answer that question, but I think we need to better understand. And when you look through what's written here in terms of open space goals, which comes from, in many cases, the open space recreation plan, maybe it's not, maybe the verb is not right. Maybe it's not just increase. Maybe there's something more to it that you want to describe related to open space in the entree of the land use goals. Because this is about what you're focused on, I think, is on the land use goals, promote balanced growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And one of them is about open
Yeah.
space.
And it's not
But-
necessarily increasing open space overall, maybe, but it's
Right.
Strategically maintaining open space that enhances the quality of the air and the water, or something like that, rather than just increasing the
Right.
amount.
And again, if you look more at the natural resources goals, there are more specific statements about, for instance, the importance of water resources. And so, we might be able to either cross-reference or, pull those goals out and either, repeat them if necessary, though we're trying to, stay away from that kind of thing. But I think it will help when you've had a chance to kind of go through, when you have some time, and look for what the key concepts are, and if you see them, if you see a better place for them to be moved to, that's fine. What we don't want to, find out is that we left out something that's so important, that it's just a gaping hole in the goals. I don't think we did that because we didn't really eliminate any categories of goals, but you need to be comfortable with how they are worded.
So I think that these sorts of things, like this particular goal that we're focused on, if that's something that's important to the members of the planning board, if you can give that some consideration when you're giving us comments, and maybe there's a couple of key areas where you're not really sure and you need to give it more time and thought, and then in the feedback process, we can take a look at it and see how we need to rewrite this particular goal in relation to the overarching goal of promoting balanced growth.
Right.
And then as it relates to, and once you get to the more specific goals related to open space protection.
And again, because these are our recommendations, there's a draft report that has all of the, what we've done, why we've done it, what our recommendations are. But if you are happy with the goals the way they are, you don't need to make any changes. We're just saying, we've looked at it, we've seen other master plans, we've worked on other master plans, and this is how we think, you should go. But, you know, and that also gets into the question of what form your potential, any future update. I mean, the accepting of this plan that we're giving you, the report on this, doesn't mean that it now supersedes your adopted master plan. It's just food for you to mull over and decide whether or not you want to make those changes. So it's not, you know, we can't force you to adopt these. When we get into the discussion of Metro Future Goals, we'll talk a little bit about how that fits in.
I think one of the, finally getting through the back half of this, I'm looking under page 9 under G on housing goals. And I think I'm glad that you mentioned it in that perspective, that this is more of a recommended or it's a discretionary. Currently, the town feels that we've met the 10% affordable housing quota, and we met it with the approval of a large development, which is London Ponds. And so all of the future projects that are being submitted under that particular statute, we feel that, you know, we don't have to have a forced 40B because of that. Now, that doesn't mean that there hasn't been a lot of research and planning and thinking about how we address the issue of diversity and affordability in housing. We had some significant discussions around that in the CPC review process, the funding cycle this year. And we're constantly faced with a conflict in terms of, you know, a number of the projects that have been proposed and a number of the initiatives essentially don't encourage the diversity of this kind of housing spread around the town. It's more localized in one place, which is, to me, not really what it was all intended to be. But nonetheless, I think the wording of this should be looked at, because I'm not sure this is what the zoning board is doing and what, when we review projects, we're under the...
Or the position of the town.
The position of the town is that we've met the quota, the quotient. So, and that doesn't mean we're not looking at, you know, diversity options in housing. That it's looking at this particular vehicle. So I thought I might enter that into the discussion on that.
That was one of my
He's the housing
areas.
planner.
Is that one of your areas?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
I respect that a lot, and I was worried that leading with that particular goal might be not necessarily the way to lead with all of those goals. But I want to just point out that I wrote it in a way, and it may not be the right way still, but I wrote it in a way that talks about providing and maintaining for a reason. You have achieved your 10% goal, which is also fantastic, or are nearly at 10%, something like that. But there's a couple things missing. One is not a clear strategy on monitoring your affordable units, so therefore maintaining the affordability of the existing inventory. And then as part of that is to have an updated housing production plan. Even though you're at 10% or near 10%, when the next decennial census comes out, you'll have new numbers to deal with and potentially new constraints on your housing inventory. And it's important to have that intact. To create friendly 40Bs may also create affordable housing that is more relevant to some unmet needs here in Hingham. So I want to just encourage you to, and we can rework that first goal
Sure.
about the requirements, because
Sure.
I agree, you've met that requirement or you're near that requirement. So let's take a look at that one, but I really would also still encourage you to think about the maintenance piece.
Yeah, I think that's a very
Okay.
valid approach.
I would also like to look at this carefully, the housing goals, to maybe target the housing needs or our desires for increased housing around certain geographic
Okay.
areas. So through this goal, maybe talk about transportation nodes and the type, you know, that if we're going to have some kind of congregate housing or, you know, more dense housing, that it happens in those areas, and that we desire to continue to have large sort of pastoral lots, you know, farmland type areas in other areas. And I'm just wondering how that holds, what kind of weight that holds when unfriendly 40Bs are proposed, can we kind of shape this so that we're not saying, you know, we're closed for business? No, we want housing in this town that meets the needs of the people, the residents of Hingham, but we also want to preserve Hingham the way it is. And so can we shape this language to kind of say, we have a plan, we're not excluding everybody, but our plan says here, here, and here, not everywhere.
This is the importance of that first goal about the land use goals, which is kind of supposed to set the stage for some of this, which should direct this part of the discussion once we get to this section of the master plan. So the balanced growth point. Once you get into the balanced growth discussion and further into those goals and the objectives, that's where you would talk about certain locations or where you want to encourage. To all of the points that you just made would essentially bolster the points that you're bolster the land use goals. So I think though some of what you just said, I would definitely want to take a look at this more carefully. And I'll let Mary talk because I know she wants to.
Yeah, I'd like to pass to the board also. I emailed this to you. As you think about the point that Judith just brought up, I sent this to you previously, and I think it bears looking at again. It's a court decision, and it's an HAC decision that talks about how the master plan can help a community define appropriate locations for different housing density types, and how that may help you when faced with friendly or unfriendly 40Bs. And it talks about what types of information could be in a master plan, and it's for the planning board to determine if you'd like to have that type of information in this master plan. Now would be the time for us to be sure that we incorporate that into the goals. And I have an extra copy of these.
Lynn, there was quite a bit of discussion about that at the first hearing, and we were focusing more on the area, West Hingham train station, the commuter rail, and the bus lot and that whole area,
For the
Bear Cove.
TOD?
Yeah, and then we did a lot of talk about this.
We did talk about that a lot, and I believe that those comments from those meetings have also been incorporated into the plan
Yeah, a lot of them have.
from the housing.
Okay.
But I think a precedent's helpful to see, you know, what other towns are doing and how other towns have addressed this issue.
Yeah, this is just some light reading.
I do think the most important thing is for you to focus on the land use goals. I'm sensing that on some of the comments that I've heard so far, that to really make sure that we've got that right is important, because it sets forth that balance, and whether or not we've struck it, or whether or not you want to do something a little bit differently from your last master plan.
So do you see in the promote balanced growth as it's written now, there are 3 kind of sub-goals, right? Ensuring that, you know, that our zoning promotes this balanced growth, that we have high-quality commercial development in South Hingham and the Hingham shipyard, and that we increase the amount of open space. We seem to have a gaping hole in the housing.
Yeah, I think it actually needs to be encourage high-quality commercial and residential development in 1.2.
But not
I wouldn't
in
rule,
those,
I wouldn't
not in
rule it
those
out.
areas, right? High-quality commercial in South Hingham, and then we'd have to say where we want the.
Yeah, again, I think that is where I would need your input. And again, I'm really seeking that kind of that level of feedback in the form of comments. So
Okay.
I really just wanted to have kind of a broader discussion, especially since
Right.
not everybody is
One
on the
thing that a
same
couple
page,
people have
literally.
mentioned to me, and I don't know where the context of this would go, I don't know if this is the right place for it, but it's the issue of our water access and limitations to it because of, I think docks is a big issue for people now. Docks are being extended way out, and how does that change the way we travel on those waterways? Because all of a sudden, you know, the way that you took your boat is completely changed, so I don't know. And, you know, I know that's Conservation Commission is the sort of the overseer of docks, but, you know, I think it is a concern for people who are on the water.
Yeah, I think that's it's not really a goal or, master plan section. You could possibly address it under transportation, you could address it under conservation, if you think it rises to the level of a goal and possibly an objective. But again, we're trying to sort of keep the higher level issues at the top, and action recommendations, implementation would get that. That's where that level of specificity would most likely occur.
It could even be in the open space goals, so that it just preserves the natural resources for
Waterways as well as.
people's enjoyment.
Scenic views.
It also, it may be on page 5C, number 2, instead of protect water resources, not that we don't want to do that, but it may be a broader, larger goal about water resources, which would then have some other sub-goals that talk about what
So
your,
we could just add 2.
Some
Well,
sort
look
of
at that, an access
activity-related
or
or
something.
access,
Okay.
yeah.
In 2.2.
and we can
I
revise.
think access is huge, right?
Yeah,
Where the
I
water
can
is.
understand.
Yeah, access and movement, maybe, or something.
Yeah.
We'll,
Yeah, access and enjoyment.
Right?
One of the other things we've talked about in terms of the residential and commercial development is a mixed-use kind of a development where we're looking at residential and retail. It's like the overlay district downtown. It's ways that we can create more activity day and evening, where we don't just have one primary use that's really the dominant use. We have more of a balance of the uses, so we can get some activity, more of a...
In the downtown area?
Primarily downtown, I'm thinking downtown, Shipyard, that kind of...
It's feeling
the
like a
square.
cross-cutting goal that we would need to actually update in a number of areas, because also on page 9, your active recreation goals, which we proposed no revisions to, perhaps you need to add, although does that come right out of the open space plan?
This comes right out of the master plan. I
Oh, it's
didn't
out of the
try to
master plan,
pull
okay.
directly from the open space
So
plan.
we may want to also consider an active recreation, because it's recreation, economic development, access. It's a lot of different issues, it sounds like, right?
What,
But you were also rereferencing mixed use
I was thinking more
in
2.3.
downtown.
Also.
Page 10,
Yeah.
2.3. Mixed-use development in the downtown and the Hingham Shipyard, focusing more on the day and evening use for a more vibrant kind of activity level.
How's that
Right.
different than 2.3, though?
It is 2.3,
yeah.
but it was just basically combining that area, that particular series of goals with the original.
The
land
other
use
thing
goals in the front.
that I would, as you go forward with your additional review, having, written the full report, there are things in the chapters, we're still reviewing and working on the chapters that describe the alternative scenarios workshops and the results of that. Tim Reardon, who did all that modeling work, took a look at it today and flagged a few things that we might want to incorporate into the goals as well. So I think when you, some of these issues about what type of development, where, were addressed in those 2 workshops. So you might want to take a look at the write-up there and see if some of these issues are covered, and if you're comfortable with how they show up there, there may be things you want to highlight and say, let's pull this out and make it a goal as well. But there was a lot of content in that, a lot of material, and I think it was a little difficult to absorb it all in one 2-hour meeting. And we will also be providing Mary with all of the data that went into that and the model, and possibly, have some training on how to use that. And that's a very powerful tool for looking at the specific focus areas, the shipyard, downtown, harbor, South Hingham, and really drilling down and playing sort of the what-if scenarios. What if we increased housing in the shipyard? What if we increased housing downtown by, multiple story, adding on above existing stories? So there's a lot of detail in there that I think you'll need to sort of look at, and that will help inform some of the decisions about the goals going forward. So I've just given you a lot of homework.
Your first question was, do you have any questions about the hierarchy? I like this hierarchy because it feels like it all accordions into each other, and you can open it up that way.
And I think you have captured the major areas
Okay.
pretty well.
Good.
So you said the next couple slides are where we go from here, slides, or, I'm trying to think,
yeah, sure.
we should
Yeah.
take public
I
comment
think,
now, or?
Well, so the third question is about inaccuracies or things that you think you've already done, and I think there's a question about the balanced growth that you need to spend some time thinking about related to open space or growth in general. That can't be answered tonight, I understand that. But if there's anything else, was there anything else that we captured incorrectly or something that you want to make sure you let us know about tonight? If not, that can be done in follow-up comments too.
Yeah, I think we touched on the missing fourth bullet point,
Right.
which is anything else that needs
Continue.
additional discussion or clarification. So I'll go very quickly through the remaining slides if that's acceptable, and...
Yeah, we'll go through the main slides and then I'll open up public comment.
Yeah,
and we'll let people
terrific.
contribute.
Okay. Okay, so this, where did these Metro Future goals come from? Metro Future is a regional development plan that MAPC worked on for many years, involving many stakeholders, and the plan was adopted in 2008 by the MAPC Council, and a large part of the scope of work of this grant that we have with Hingham was to start doing some assessment of local plans, and again, this feeds into the zoning reform bill, which says local master plans need to be assessed against the regional plans. So what we did is basically, and you'll see in the report, I made a chart that has all 65 Metro Future goals. I don't think anybody's ever typed them all out like that before. And then I looked at the goals as they're presented here tonight, not necessarily the original goals. And basically, Metro Future is very, very broad. It's very policy-oriented. Some of what's in there, some of these goals really aren't relevant at the municipal level. They're just not things that a municipality can do. Others were, because the MAPC region ranges from Boston to Boxborough, very wide range of community types. Some just were not relevant. Urban gardening is not relevant here. You're not an urban community. So what I did is I went through and reviewed your goals, these recommended goals, and just made a statement. You have a goal that addresses this. That's one conclusion. One is this goal, the Metro Future goal, is not particularly relevant to a municipality. Others where you might not have had a goal statement in the plan, but you're taking actions that would indicate, congruence with that goal. So basically, my assessment, and this has not been given the MAPC blessing in any way necessarily, is that there is a high degree of congruence between what you're trying to accomplish through your master plan and all your other activities. Again, as I said, some of the scenario planning material that you'll see in the report and some of the discussions we had in the office today, there may be things where we would suggest a certain one of the three scenarios in those focus areas are more relevant to Metro Future, and we would just highlight that. But whether or not you feel that you want to increase density or do whatever those scenarios say, level of housing in a particular area, but we've just tried to flag those scenarios and how they fall out on the Metro Future scale. But I would say that, and this is the first time we've really done this, I think, with a local municipal plan, so it's a work in progress, but I would say that, as a regional citizen of, Hingham as a community, as part of the region, is doing a good job towards Metro Future. So the report that I've given to the board, and Mary, I've given you some extra copies, and we'll certainly get that to you electronically first thing tomorrow. One standard chapter, just sort of what the grant is about, how did it come into being. Then, because this the goals update was really the most important part of this project, we put that, even though it may not follow sort of chronologically or linearly, we put that material right up front and explained everything that we explained here tonight. Then there's also regional plan self-assessment, which again is the Metro Future goals, the look at the alternative scenarios. That's where that chapter. And then there's also what the new name, I guess, of this zoning reform legislation is the Planning Ahead for Growth Act. And that's, there are 4 provisions in that act which, in order to get, it's an opt-in provision where if you meet those 4 requirements, then you get some additional benefits through zoning tools that you're allowed to use. It's kind of complicated, and one of our recommendations is, just to educate yourselves more about that and how that might affect you. But they relate to economic development, and your designation of 43D fits in with that. There's a housing provision for by right, multifamily by right, and there you would have to do some additional work probably to make that really meet that requirement. One of them is about low impact development and stormwater regulations, and that I think you're partway to meeting, but not all of the way. And then there's something about conservation, residential design, and whether or not you have a bylaw that meets those requirements. And that, again, I think you would need to do more work to meet that. So that's kind of what that chapter says, just sort of what are the requirements, how do we see you meeting them. And then chapter 4 is just all of the meetings, the notes, the survey, everything that we did to reach out to folks is in chapter 4. And then we have an implementation plan, which basically says, here are some things, depending on priorities, staff availability, funding availability, here are some things to bring your master plan more into alignment, such as the public health chapter, doing maybe some more energy work. And these are all simply recommendations of what, if I was Mary and, was given the go-ahead to do a substantial update to the plan, these are some of the things we would have you recommend you look at. It doesn't mean that these all need to be done. They're kind of a laundry list, and maybe public health chapter is something you'd want to take, maybe updating the census information, which I know Mary's already initiated. So it's a list of things that you could do. And then the appendices, of course, are bigger than the actual report. So, and they're all in there. There are all the presentations from the various meetings, summary of every meeting, that we held. So just a lot of background information. And here's some of the recommendations. Some of it is about to meet the required and optional elements. Here are some additional chapters you might want to do, or sections in your master plan. In order to meet the planning ahead for growth requirements, the opt-in provisions, there would be some additional work you would need to do. The housing work, the housing production plan that Jenny mentioned. So these are all things, and some of these things are already ongoing or have been started. And then we thought that the schedule of having all your comments to Mary by February 10th, we would turn around and make the necessary changes. And then Mary, if you have any further thoughts on where you think the town might want to go with this.
Would you like to hear from me about next steps?
Can I ask a question before we go to next steps? This seems like an awfully cumbersome master plan, and there seems like there's a lot of sort of like the appendices. Can we have one that just doesn't include the appendices as the sort of core master
This
plan
is just sort of like our report.
It's our report, it's not your master plan.
yeah,
So
your
we don't
master
have, we
plan
can
is-
incorporate, okay.
It's just we wanted you to have documentation of everything
I
that we
appreciate
did.
that, I just didn't know if
Yeah.
you expected us to adopt all of this into our master
No.
plan, okay.
No.
No, at least that's why I wanted to really just focus on
Right. On
this.
the goals,
Because
yeah.
this would be,
Yeah.
you would take this and then,
Okay, that's what I was
Make it
thinking
into
too.
the rest
All
of
right.
the
Great
master
minds,
plan.
great minds think alike.
yes. So, yeah, this is really just our report to you. We wanted
Okay.
to make sure you had everything. And as Joan mentioned, our data services team, they're working on compiling all of the, they're going to create a zip file so that you'll have all of the data that was compiled and collected from the 2 scenario planning workshops.
Yeah.
And that, I think, as Joan mentioned, they can come back here and provide you with a more detailed training so that you can actually use the material on your own. It was an interactive product really for you to use. So that'll be all yours. But that's really just, that's just part of our task
Okay.
here.
Gotcha.
The big thing is really this.
Yes, I know, I
and
agree.
It's only 14 pages.
Right.
There.
Well, and
That's
I
all
think
you-
there's some relevant information in here that could be
No,
I
absolutely.
certainly
with this to make
agree.
it
Don't
more.
underestimate the background. at all.
Exactly.
Well, and I see
This
us
is where I-
referring back to all of these
Yes.
documents as we dive deeper into the actual approaches under each goal. So this is fabulous, and I appreciate all the work that
Yeah.
you guys have done on getting so much input from the town of Hingham and doing all this work for us, because I know we could not have done it otherwise.
Yeah, no, I think it was a great collaboration, and I just want to acknowledge Mary again and the board who's been very supportive in giving us as much time as we need on your agendas.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jenny. Thanks, Joe.
And I would also just say that we are available. If you find that when you do the review, if there's things that you want to continue to pursue, I mentioned to Mary earlier, and I think maybe one of you at a previous meeting, that we have district local technical assistance funding. It's on a rolling application. It's available to all of our communities in the MAPC Council, so that you can access some additional technical assistance planning if, for example, you want to continue with this process so that you get to the next phase of the master planning update. Or if you just want to focus on a specific section, like the public health goals, whatever it might be, and we've come up with a couple of different things. Think about that, and it is something that I can work with Mary on as a follow-up. And Joan.
Great, thank you. Go ahead.
So, very briefly, because I know people are waiting to speak, with regard to some next steps, and I will type this up and send it out to the board as well. As Joan and Jenny have said, the initial homework for the board is to review this material, particularly the goals, and first of all, just confirm if you are in agreement with content, and if you're not, please give us input on where you would like it to have it wordsmithed, whether that's the land use goals or the housing elements, such as we discussed tonight. I also am interested in hearing back from the board your feeling on adopting this new format, which is in alignment with the Planning Ahead for Growth Act. It does position you to be one step closer to being in alignment with the state if they ever do adopt that, instead of having to then go back and take this information and put it into that format. And so it is definitely something to think about. Also mentioned tonight is that there is the optional public health section. I will send you the definition of what public health is, and it's not what you would initially think it is. It's really a lot of material that's in a lot of other sections that talks about complete streets and the natural and built environment and how they may contribute to or be a barrier to public health. We've spent a lot of time talking about sidewalks and bikeways and paths. So it's interesting how that's being defined by this new proposed act, and we really don't have a section that focuses on that, even though a lot of that material is handled in other sections. So that's kind of the initial homework, but the broader kind of thinking points for the planning board are to review the HAC case and think about what that case may tell us, and that may affect what you say about what you'd like in some of the different goals, the land use goals. I think that this is an important time for that to be really strongly considered in this process. Also, we have recommendations, which I'll hand out to you again tonight, and these are your recommendations from your existing plan, and we've started to update them. Katie Lacey started it, I've been working on it. That's a good place to revise our recommendations and fold them back into the master plan. So that will be a future homework. And we talked about two more things. We talked about meeting with the Conservation Commission together, and we've scheduled it a few times, and then both of your workloads have forced us to cancel. So that's still on the burner for us to do.
And what's that regarding?
To talk about the open space plan and goals and just foster a collaborative dialogue as we meet with the HDIC. The Concom is interested in meeting with you and seeing, because it's important that all the plans are congruent.
And they're currently preparing an updated plan of all the conservation land in the town and all the access to it, and which parcels are connected, so that people know what's there.
And we're working on developing priorities for acquisition. And within the community planning department, we're taking a look at how we should look at priorities for acquisition, whether for resource protection or open space protection or land banking. How does that overlap with the projected impacts of sea level rise, which we have some modeling on our GIS system. So finally, I would just underscore that this DLTA grant money is on a rolling award process, and so not necessarily immediately, but if the planning board, whether you would like to work on conservation subdivision design and look at that section of your regulations, or if you would like to work on a public health section of your plan, or perhaps just have some more facilitated meetings around a particular section. We have our plan production document, which I've been working to update, and this is something that the town needs to have, an adopted document that the state has also endorsed. We have a document twice. I don't believe the state has ever endorsed it. It needs to be updated again with current census data and then hopefully resubmitted to the state.
Has the state not endorsed it because they don't approve of it, or because they just haven't gotten around to it?
I think that they had some concerns about it the last time, and I can report out to you with some written comments. It was prior to my time here, so I don't want to speculate. However, there are pretty strict guidelines about what needs to be in it. And if we wanted to take this to the next level, we could also apply for DLT grant money and ask MAPC to work with us to move forward to a format that the state might adopt. So that's all a way of saying that if there's substantive topics in here that the planning board would like to have further dialogue with, facilitated by this team, there is grant money available. And I could investigate the depth of that opportunity for you if you identified some guidance, and purely optional.
Thank you. All right, I know that we have some folks here who want to offer some comments, and we'd love to hear from you. So if you come up to the microphone, just please identify your name and your address. Not everybody at once. Greg, you want to go?
I wasn't looking for it.
Anybody want to make any?
Faith Burbank, 17 Andrews Isle. I've sent in some comments already to Mary. Oh, everybody has them, so I don't need to address that because you have them. Just looking at the water resources and the natural resources. When I read Mary was very nice and gave me a copy to preview. I came away with seeing this as a document that was encouraging communities within Hingham. And for instance, you'll be able to identify the characteristics of your community and be able to define what you needed, and if new development was to come in, how it would impact it, how it would fit in. That community aspect was a little different approach than I had been thinking about. I don't know if you all are endorsing that component, or if that's just something that I read when I was reading it. any comment that way.
Are you referring to the focus areas during
Yes.
the workshops, the South
No,
Hingham?
no, in your outline, your draft tonight.
I'm not sure I'm understanding what you're saying by community.
You said different neighborhoods would have different characteristics, I believe, and that you would want to try to further those characteristics in the development process in Hingham. Did anybody else read that besides me?
I did, yeah.
And I guess in part it referred to how do you develop within communities without overwhelming that community? And how does it fit into the architecture, the character, the historical, the natural components? But instead of looking at it town-wide, it was looking at it by neighborhood, or neighborhood.
But I read that and I hope we look at it both ways.
Mhm.
The town as a cohesive whole and things that unite us all, like this
Right.
open space and
Yeah.
how the open space is all united throughout the town. But that we also acknowledge that, a neighborhood like Liberty Pole is different than a neighborhood like Charles Street. That they have different lot sizes, house sizes, roadways, sidewalks, no sidewalks. And so we do have distinct neighborhoods that also want to retain what they're about.
Yeah, you have to look at the whole, in my
Right.
opinion, as well as
Right,
the
but I
components.
think in my interpretation of this, that was just one, that the whole thing looks at the whole.
Yep,
And
yeah.
that this neighborhood thing was
I read it that
acknowledging
way,
that
too.
within the whole, there's
read it
Crow
that way,
Point,
too.
which is kind of different,
Yeah.
than downtown.
Okay, well, we read it the same way, that was.
Yeah.
One of the things I
looking at.
also saw in that was that based on the history of the town, different settlement patterns produce different neighborhood characters as we've evolved over 300-plus years. And I think that looking at all of those parameters are really key, not just dimensional, but what's the basis of this character so that when we entertain change, we're sensitive to that. We don't do something that's contradictory to that would cause it to diminish. So I read that into that too, so it's...
Thank you for clarifying that. I also come at resources, as some of you have heard before, from the watershed perspective. And so looking at that, at our natural resources in the context of our very important aquifer watershed resource. You'll see my comments kind of reflected that piece. We're very lucky to have that component here in Hingham. It was very interesting, and thank you for your perspectives and opportunities for growing. And this is such an important juncture in time for Hingham that I look forward to seeing how we can manage growth and cluster growth and in appropriate ways throughout the town. And I follow your process with great interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith, thank you.
Hi, Amy Cowan, 13 Otis Hill Road. I apologize about the hat, but I got the call that the sewer was down, and I took that seriously, so no shower before I came. But the one statement I wanted, more of a statement, is any kind of strategic work I've done in the past has always started with a vision statement, like who we are, what we're proud of, and the goals come out of that. And I think it kind of goes to a bit of what Faith said, a bit of what Judy said early, like we could have 50% say we build, baby, build, and 50% say protect our open space. I would love to see a statement that people can, that's what they can come around. Is that what they want to agree on? Is that what they want to adjust? I mean, why did we move to Hingham? Why didn't we move to Newton or Brookline? All those same places lots of young families look at. We moved here for certain reasons, and I have a feeling I'd love that to come out
And that could come from the
From a
strengths.
vision statement.
The
Yeah, I
strengths
mean-
potentially.
We
I
can
think
take-
that drives everything. It drives all the goals.
Yeah.
Just a statement. I don't know if you guys have any.
Do master plans normally have a vision statement? or
Yes.
They do?
Yeah, and your master plan may have vision statements or, broader statements that we just,
Current one does.
again, we don't have, I don't know if you have that with you, your existing master plan, but I believe it does have the overarching
It does,
vision
right.
statements.
Nicely
And
articulated.
whether or not that's exactly aligns with this, I don't know, but I'd be more than happy to take a look at that.
Right, I have some copies of the executive summary with me, but
Okay, oh, yeah.
the current master plan does have visions, and this is an intent to update the goals, and so that will be a good exercise to see where the revised goals, are they still in alignment?
Yeah.
Does that, if not, does that indicate a need for a future conversation? But I do have copies of the executive summary with me,
Maybe we should dust off the vision statement.
for anybody who wants to, so we can,
Look at that.
Sure.
Anyone else? No?
Are there copies of the original master plan, 2001, I guess it was? Are there copies of that available, not just the précis, but the actual full-size copy edition?
I can have some more printed.
Is it on our website?
It is on our
It
website.
is.
Yeah, so
Okay.
for anybody who might be watching this, and for everybody here, the current master plan is on the town website, and what we're talking about are the goals within that master plan, updating the goals. So there is a vision statement, there are recommendations, tactics, approaches, and what we're talking about are the overall goals.
And if anybody can't access it on the internet, they can contact the planning department and we can get a hard copy to them. This work tonight is not meant to supersede the entire master plan. It's just meant to update the goals and perhaps indicate where there may be areas for future work.
And I will add that the South Hingham Study Group has started to meet, which is looking at all the initiatives that are happening in the South Hingham Overlay District, which basically goes from the intersection of Gardner and Derby and Whiting over up Derby and up Whiting to the Weymouth town line. And we're looking at the different infrastructure initiatives that are going on up there, and then trying to create a vision for the area that meets, the town's, that fits into the town's goals. So probably in a year and a half or so, we would want to update those specific goals for that area within the master plan. So if you see notices of meetings coming up, please come.
Did you want to make one last point?
Yeah, just to be clear, that is February 10th an okay period of time for you to get comments back to Mary? Wanted to just check. That was my suggested time frame.
When's our next meeting? 'Cause
I don't want to
think it
force
has
it
to
on
do
you.
with-
We have
Okay.
a meeting February 10th.
Because
It's a Monday.
I think we
Have
could
a
all
meeting.
sit down and write our own reactions, but unless we speak as a board, it's kind of silly.
We can discuss it. February 10th, we have zoning articles on the agenda. We all are together, and then we have an informal discussion about a subdivision.
The other reason I'm asking this is because if you did, for public meeting and other purposes, you couldn't correspond about, this is the only time that you can have correspondence about it, so I'm just trying to be sensitive to, if you wanted to revisit this again at your next meeting, you might want to think about taking the time between now and your next meeting to have your comments, then devise something and then get back to us at MAPC, rather than, because you can't correspond about it online.
So I can put this, you can certainly
Yeah.
correspond with me, and I can put this
With
as a
Mary.
discussion matter on the February 10th meeting.
Yeah, I think we'll be able to do that.
And so the
Not if
board
it's
can,
board.
and then if I get comments in advance, I can disseminate them to the board, so you can all come prepared to have a dialogue and determine where you have consensus.
So by when do you want our comments?
Well, it sounds like
Chair.
you would come to the meeting on February 10th, if I may, and then you would formulate comments, it sounds like it's a little bit different than what I was originally proposing. One way is you would give all your comments to Mary by February 10th, but it doesn't enable you to have any further discussion about it. Or you can come to your next meeting on February 10th, time permitting, discuss it, and then Mary would prepare comments to give back to me, and I will get back
How
to you.
full is our agenda on the 10th?
On the 10th, we have zoning articles.
We'll be able to fit it in. So why don't we just get you, anybody wants to give any individual comments to Mary before February 10th, to say the 8th.
And I will disseminate them to the board so that you're aware.
And then we'll talk about everything that night.
And we'll
Well, it
discuss
might be helpful though, if there were a lot of them, if you had a day to collate so that,
So the 10th is a Monday? 10th is a Monday, I'm assuming,
The
right?
10th is a
So
Monday.
the previous Friday would be, the previous Thursday would be,
the 6th.
give you enough time? Do you want more time?
Does it give us enough?
I mean, when we have your comments, you'll just put them in a Word document and send them out, right? So-
Right.
I'll
Do we have
group
enough
them
time?
by topic.
Yeah.
So if you send me comments on land use goals, I will copy and
Yeah, do a Word
paste.
document, send them out. So
And,
is the 6th good enough time for you to get them out?
Is that enough time for us? It's a week, right?
Well, let's shoot for it. We can always add to it. But
My only constraint is that I need to wrap up, just from the report side, I need to wrap up the report by not later than the end of February. So I just want to, I don't know how often you meet in February.
almost every Monday.
It is almost every
Except for the
Monday,
holiday,
okay.
I think. right?
Well, we'll be discussing it on the 10th, and
You may meet on
we'll
that
take
day.
it from there.
Okay,
All right, so we'll say the 6th.
So
All right.
because of the grant, you have to end it by the end
Yes.
of February?
yes.
And
Can
the
we
board-
request an extension or not?
Well, that's the idea behind, if you want continued assistance,
Right, then
let's
we apply.
pursue another mechanism for that, not through this grant process.
Right, they really need to
It's like
wrap
a
up, because
technicality,
this
if you
grant,
will.
we actually were awarded quite a long time ago.
Yes.
And then it sat for a while with all the transition. So they really need to finish this dialogue, and then if we want to keep talking, they'll be happy to give us more money to keep talking.
Correct. Well,
No strings attached.
Happy might not be the answer.
And the planning board, you all have a copy of the full draft report. So although your focus is on the goals, this is the full draft report with all the appendices. If you have comments on the full report as well. But the main focus is the goals.
okay, so we'll also give this to you electronically.
Please do.
Yeah,
And
I
then if
don't- I
anyone
didn't know
wants
if
it,
you
I
had
can
that.
email it to them, if any members of the public are interested in.
It'd be easier to edit if we had it electronically.
I won't be editing the full report.
No, I meant our comments coming back. If we had a Word document or something, it might be easier.
I did email you the goals.
Okay, and that's in a Word document. Okay.
Yes.
That's good.
And I can email it again if anybody doesn't have that.
I don't mind prolonging this one point. If you have, if you want to edit in a document, I have no problem with taking those track changes of a document. If you want to talk, and provide comments to Mary, that's also fine with me, or both, whatever you're most comfortable with, so. But I'm also happy to take track changes. So that's fine with me.
I want to thank Joan and Jennifer for their hard work. This is excellent put together. I want to thank Mary as well for
Thank
her
you.
hard work. And I want to thank, I attended all of the sessions, as did many of my colleagues, and I thank all of the citizens who participated. They were excellent, and the comments and the contributions of people from our community, hopefully we captured everything in this document, and very much appreciated that, we're taking our guidance from you. So thank you all, those here and those watching at home. So thank you.
Thank you all.
Do we have the applicant for the 9 o'clock matter here yet? No. Go ahead and address I guess the next item would be the minutes of January 6, 2014. Did everybody get a chance to look at the minutes? Yep.
Pass it down, Dick.
Doesn't matter.
All right, does anybody have anything they'd like to change or add to the minutes? Entertain a motion that we approve the minutes of January 6, 2014. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Okay.
Any abstentions? Abstained, I wasn't present.
I wasn't present either.
Do you have your Mullins Rule paperwork in there, or no, for January 6th?
On what matter? For what matter? No, we don't have
And then you missed
that.
a meeting as well. Did we get you the Mullins Rule paperwork?
I don't remember seeing it.
Okay, so I'll have to
Actually,
get...
on this, I wasn't even on. Oh, no.
Well, Mayor, we need the Mullins paperwork for, under the Subdivision Control Act, right?
But you don't need it for the other ones?
We don't need it for zoning amendments,
Okay.
correct?
No, not for zoning
Oh,
amendments.
Joan, I have a
I mean, that's
thing
just,
for you.
that's just a public. But Walter, you'll need it for
He missed this. Did you miss the cell tower?
cell tower.
Yeah, I watched that.
I watched that on TV, that was an
But you
interesting
still
meeting.
need to sign the paperwork.
I do, I watched it on TV. Hopefully that's good enough.
Walter gets, and Gary gets the,
Very exciting TV show.
and the minutes.
You guys are having a ball.
Okay, so Walter and Gary need the cell tower.
And a quick question for you too, Mary. Obviously, I wasn't here on January 6th because I was ill. Am I allowed to sign this? So this was the 303 Gardner subdivision, which I guess was approved on January 6th.
You are the chair.
So I guess I can
And
assume
so,
it for the board,
and
right?
Gary was absent too, and he was the clerk. So the
Right,
problem
so-
is that we didn't have, Judy was the acting chair, but she couldn't sign it because neither of you were here.
Okay, so I can sign it? I think I can.
I think you can.
I think I can, too,
Yes.
because I'm signing it for the board, so.
Thanks for
All
the
right.
copies, too.
And I can go out in the hallway and see if the next applicants are here.
Yeah, I mean, if they're here, we'll take them early, right?
And as far as the future schedule, so in February, we have a meeting February 10th on zoning articles.
We don't have one next week.
We do not have one next week. We could certainly schedule one if you want. We have a meeting February 7th, and, February 10th on zoning articles. The next week is school vacation week. The planning board has indicated you're available if we needed you. Right now, we
Well,
don't.
Monday's a holiday.
Monday's the holiday, it would be a Wednesday. Right now, I don't think we need you unless you wanted to have, a special meeting. February 24th, though, is the cell tower,
Right.
and that could be a lengthy hearing.
Yeah, it will be.
And I did just get in a preliminary subdivision today that's gonna go on February 10th. So if more applications come in, you may need to find time for another meeting
For
in
that
February.
Okay.
Right now, it doesn't look like you have to, but the cell tower hearing could be lengthy, so I'm hesitant to put something else on
Yeah,
after.
you're
I
right.
think that's a good idea,
It will be pretty late.
given the television coverage on it.
I'm gonna check and see if our next one is in the law.
Kind of feel bad for the consultant.
I did too.
You guys watch it?
Oh,
I
yeah.
watched it, it's hilarious.
It was painful.
Oh, it's painful.
They have first. Hi, how you doing?
Keep everybody waiting.
No, you're actually early.
Right on
Thank
time.
you. It works out better for us, so.
We can get home a little early tonight.
Nice.
Are there any butters, have you received any butter interested in this next item?
I haven't received interest, but it hasn't been advertised. This is not.
I'm just wondering if we can start before the 9 o'clock designated time.
This isn't a public hearing, this is a request to waive site plan.
Okay.
So if the board chooses not to waive site plan, the applicant needs to know so they can prepare a submittal for you.
Okay, so if we deny the waiver, they'll have to come back.
I received just as way of background, if I may bring the board up to speed, there's some work being done on the retaining wall at the rear of the property.
Right.
And That came through about 2 months, a month and a half ago for some retaining wall repair work. And it was a building permit. And staff signed off on it to allow those repairs to go forward. Another building permit came forward to split the previous bank unit into 3 new tenant spaces. And the amount of the proposed improvements triggered the site plan requirement. And that brings the applicant here for the board to determine if you choose to waive site plan, or if you would want a site plan application.
All right, well,
The amount you're referring to, dollar amount.
Correct.
Construction.
I will tell you a little bit about the project then. If this is just a request for the waiver. If you could just, whoever's going to speak for the applicant, just identify yourself with the microphone, please.
Good evening, members of the board. I'm John Hajar, trustee of the Lincoln Street Realty Trust. And Frank Kalor, my property manager, will get into the specifics. I'll just give a broad overview. There's not going to be any additional square footage added to the site. It's just merely subdividing the former Citibank space, which was vacated last year at some point. From my understanding, the actual site visits for these, well, we have 2 signed leases now, a dry cleaner and a physical therapist. But it appears that the number of visits that these 2 users will generate will be less than the bank did. So, and again, I think the big issue here is we're not adding any additional space, we're just subdividing existing space. And I'll let Frank Kalor, my property manager, speak to more specifics.
I'm also doing double time as the construction supervisor, so hopefully I can answer any of those questions should you have any. The site is, as Mary indicated, is being broken into 3 separate tenants. You have the square footage there. We had approximately 5,600 with the bank square feet. 5,600 square feet with the bank. And we've got a breakdown of 2,100 for the dry cleaner. The physical therapist is about 1,700, and the remaining space, which we plan to be a retailer, will be about 1,700. The calculation which I presented brings us to about 100 spaces, rounding up. We currently have 99 spaces on site. As 1 unit that existed previously in a retail environment gave us a calculation of about 98.5 if we run those numbers. So we're say technically we're within that range with these proposed 3 tenants. There was a plan that was presented with the application, the 2011 Alta survey plan, which shows the parking configuration as it exists now and
Should be in your
and was then.
Did you?
Well, there was a smaller version, and at the time of application, I did not have a larger, but if you would like a larger copy, I do have that.
And I think what Mr. Kalura is referring to is, I laid out in the cover memo that the applicant is not only looking for guidance as to whether or not you'll waive site plan, the other question relates to parking and whether or not a special permit A3 would be required. The physical therapist use is not explicitly named in the bylaw, and so one of the discussions that we've been having is, would the parking requirement for physical therapists fall into the service business at 5 spaces per 1,000 square feet, or medical and dental, which is 1 space for 175 square feet? And if you apply service business, the proposed uses seem to have the same parking requirement as the last use. If the medical dental standard is applied, the applicant would need to request parking relief through a special permit A3. This site was approved prior to binding site plan review. there was an approval for a Starbucks because of a sit-down restaurant, so there was a special permit A2, but that was prior to binding site plan. And so those are the two decision points for the board with regard to providing guidance on the site plan and guidance on the parking as to whether you feel you can determine if it's adequate.
With respect to the distinction in the two uses, are the number of employees the same, even though it's split, one unit split to three? Are the number of employees the same when you add up the three, or are there more employees?
Actually less, given the proposed condition of 3 tenants. The physical therapists, we spoke to them, they would have 3 therapists and 2 supports, but in most of the times, they anticipate only about 3 employees. The dry cleaner would have 6 employees, but that would be in the rotation, so they would generally have about 4 on an average basis.
So in terms of the therapist, if there are 3 employees and the visits are, what, half-an-hour visits, would there be a frequency of patient use that would be an increase over a retail?
That question did come up when we spoke. It wouldn't even be maxing out at that point. The frequency, they're not lined up like doctor's offices to get in and out. They're usually scheduled and they're pretty far apart. By contrast, the Citibank that we had there previously, the information I came up with is that they had 12 employees.
So something's wrong with the
Employed, exactly. And, they estimated upwards to 40 or so customers coming in and out with the ATM there too. So there was quite a bit of travel.
And we also have the benefit of precedent with the physical therapists. They operate in town now, further north on Lincoln Street. And I think they're considered as a, not as a medical, but as the other, what was the other use?
Service business.
Service business. And I think that, in fact, that they are not generating any more trips than service business would require.
Are there any additional demands on trash and dumpsters and things like that with the 3 separate tenants versus 1?
We don't anticipate. We noticed recently now with the displacement of the trash containers that they are for Starbucks. They're over by their back door. That will all be reorganized after the construction is complete, and it'll be put back in the bin that's in the back left corner of that site. Should we need an additional containment area, there is a location next to the building to fence off and put additional containers. But this type of use, and I did ask them, and they don't anticipate a lot of usage. Usually in some of the properties that I do manage, there may be small tenants like these, and they'll actually share a container. So that's certainly a possibility. We certainly want to keep that, that usage down to a minimum.
With this change, are we basically at the max relative to the parking capacity of the site?
I'm sorry?
With this change of the subdivision in 3 tenant spaces, are we basically now at the maximum as to what the overall site can handle? You said there were 99 spaces, was it?
There were 99, yes. We are there, although we've looked at that, and the rear of that building has a couple of loading docks, which we don't foresee any use for those. Opposite those loading docks, there is some space for possibly looking at maybe parallel parking or perpendicular.
So if the frequency of patronage of these 3 tenants were to increase, would there be a contingency plan on site where you could accommodate more cars?
Yeah, we
would revisit that, and yeah.
Right. In fact, that little loading dock, when the Rite Aid was a market way back, there's a loading dock that's been inactive ever since. I guess that supermarket closed. So that space there is just dead space right now that could be reconfigured for parking. So, I mean, we're at the limit, and we were there before, but we, as I said, we anticipate actual less usage than Citibank, even though Citibank wasn't that busy. In the third prospective tenant, we were talking to many prospects, but it appears it may be a cell phone store, and they're pretty benign traffic users as well. But we have no formal letter of intent or any offer from any prospective tenants right now.
Yeah, sure, Jake, go ahead.
I'm very familiar with the site because my pharmacy down there. I went down and took a closer look at it than I normally do. And I noticed some things that I think that the planning board ought to consider before it waives any of its requirements. The first is the physical therapist is a use that is not indicated in the parking requirements of the bylaw. And the bylaw requires that a use that is not specifically permitted is one that ought to be reviewed as part of the application. Second, there are parking spaces and also aisles which do not conform dimensionally with the requirements of the bylaw. And the last comment that I have is that the retaining wall that's being worked on in accordance with the bylaw is a structure. And I think that there's some need to take a look to see whether or not the law requires us to do something. Generally, the traffic situation there is very difficult because of the amount of volume out on Lincoln Street. And the access out onto Thaxter Street is close to the intersection and is blocked from time to time. Now, that's not a reason to deny what they're asking for, but I think that the board ought to take into consideration those conditions, and possibly the owner could do something to improve the situation. I think that the proposed uses will generate more parking demand than what the bank would. If you take a look at the Institute of Transportation Engineers parking requirements, you will see that in fact is the case. It's not a dramatic increase in the amount of parking, but it is an increase nonetheless.
I think it's substantial enough a change that I think we need to review this, both parking and the use. I mean, I remember reviewing this when the bank went in, and, you know, some of that parking is behind it, which, you know, they have the numbers potentially, but that, you know, who's going to park behind there? You know, it is a tough site, as Dick said, and you do get blocked up when you go on to Thaxter. So I think, you know, it is worthy of looking at the site and understanding what these uses mean, and really looking at the parking.
And I would just add that for any multi-tenant site like this, in the last 5 or 6 years, we like to have, and I know you're familiar with this from the Planet Fitness site, we like to have a parking table that shows each use and what the number of parking spaces are, so that the building commissioner can go out and actually count the spaces, make sure they're adequately striped. And that way, if a new use comes in with a different parking requirement, that we have a tool that's very handy so that you don't have to come in again for a parking determination, because the office can just say, okay, well, this came out, this is going in, it fits into the chart this way. So I think this would be a good time to create a usable parking charge, a parking table that lets us, you know, have the number of spaces per use as a tool for the future. I would also, just since a physical therapist is not a stated use on our table, there's the physical therapist in Crow Point Pizzeria building, which I assume is the person that's moving over? No?
No, I think they're in John Flatley's building.
Oh.
Yeah.
They're in Flatley.
Okay. Well, we do have one over in the, I don't know what that building is called, the King's Cleaner Crow Point Pizzeria building.
Yes.
In the back, there's one. And there's another one on Station Street. And I know when we did the Station Street parking, the downtown parking table, we put in a number for that use. So those two things would be helpful in just looking at what the other similar uses in town have for that. So I'm mostly concerned with the parking determination. As far as the site plan goes, that site's been operating this way for a long time, and I'm just not as concerned with that.
If I could just may add, I mean, practically speaking, parking lot's never maxed out. Even while we're doing all the work on the retaining wall, there was never any demand for those spaces. Never did we feel like we were displacing anyone. That work is largely finished now. From Ballard
You have
Commons.
you have a big empty space there right now, so that might be a tribute.
Right, I'm sure that has something to do with it, but
Yeah.
even when Citibank was operating, I never, ever saw that lot even ever close to being at capacity. Never.
The
And
only thing I see dangerous in that lot is that there's no division between it and the neighbor. So cars kind of come.
yeah, I think there's a cross, I think they have an easement that predates my ownership. I
Yeah.
think there's an easement between the medical use next door and.
Right, so that the cars
They come
can,
right through.
a
Yeah,
little bit scary, but
yeah.
that's
something
the way it is,
Anybody else, Gary, Walt, do you want to add anything?
No, I concur with what's been stated, so I think we should.
I just asked if we do it as quickly as possible.
I guess-
We have tenants that are waiting to go.
I use this Starbucks regularly, and I would agree with you. I've always been able to find a spot there, so it's not maxed out, but it's busy. It's busy.
Yes,
And-
that's the
and
nature of it.
Dick made a great point. Sometimes, if I want to go down to 3A, I just can't, because the traffic on that light is backed all the way up, and there's cars coming, I just go right and go down Thaxter. So I think what you're envisioning is going to work out there, but I agree with my colleagues that we probably should take a deeper look at it.
And just to add in, I'd like to hear too from the building inspector and DPW, and I know that there's some cracked sidewalk panels there that the DPW is going to take a look at. Maybe you guys can take a look at that too and tell us.
That was,
On Thaxter Street?
yeah, we talked to the contractor that did the wall. He said that was poured by he thinks by the town on top of an old rotting tree stump. It was not done right. So when they went up there to just grub all out that area, they're gonna re-landscape it. That would be a big improvement. He said that it was not done right. Whoever poured that sidewalk poured it right on top of an old stump.
Yeah.
And
we were
you think
there the
that
other
work's
day looking at
happening
that.
soon? Is that,
It's
talked to?
just weather related,
Yeah.
just waiting for the weather break, and they have some plantings planned, and there's some trees that grew through the old fencing, and that'll all be cleaned up.
Are you intending to repair any of the sidewalk slabs, I think was the question.
Well, I think, again, the contractor's point was, whoever did it, didn't do it right.
Okay.
There's a sidewalk slab that is almost at the top of the hill there, just before the fence ends, and it has a cone on it. It's been crushed through, and I don't know if the equipment drove on that, but as we were there the other day, we looked at that, peeling that broken piece off, you can see the crushed tree stump, or the rotted tree stump that's underneath, so everything just kind of caved in, but that will be repaired.
And I think we need to take a look at the wall, or understand that a little better. It's a little bit
Are
scary.
there tiebacks for that wall
Yes,
out into the public way?
we got an easement for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. Are you replacing them, or have you
is
checked them to make sure they're
Replacing what?
still intact, the tiebacks?
No, the firm that we hired, Seashore Contracting, and they were, we hired a Polaris Engineering, and I haven't seen their final report, but I think everything was done
Yes, we can get it.
satisfactorily, and they're very pleased with how it came out.
Prior to the work that was just completed, there were no tiebacks in there. That wall was
We have that.
constructed, was constructed against the road. It was found out later that the footing on that structure only went toward the parking lot. It did not run the other way. Hence, the wall leaned toward the
So we
footing.
did a service to the town of Hingham too, to make sure that road doesn't collapse at some point.
So the tiebacks were drilled in underneath utilities and then tethered down in and then anchoring the wall to create some back pressure.
So you're comfortable with it?
Well, it's a pretty good plan. Yeah, I'm not an engineer, but
Are you comfortable with it?
I'm very comfortable with it, yes.
If the town wants to allow Frank and I to ride on the float on the 4th of July parade, we're happy to accept the accolades.
We did a low-tech investigation, and when the property was acquired, we did mark where those two walls converge, and we didn't see any movement in the time frame between then and now, so
Would your float be a wall? What's your plan on your float, just out of curiosity?
Well, I heard it was going to be 4th of July parade.
Yeah, I just want to know what your float's going to look like, you know? Is it going to be just a big wall coming up?
For shoring up Baxter Street as a thank you to a private landowner for the public service it provides.
I think Hingham's been very good to you. I don't think we need, I don't think we need a parade.
Judy, I wouldn't be here if I didn't think the town of Hingham's a great town. And the best thing about the town of Hingham is you have one tax rate. You
Oh
treat
my
everybody
gosh.
fair.
Let's keep it that way.
All right, so I think we don't need a formal vote. I think you got your answer.
But we could try to schedule them right now.
I do
Yeah,
need to.
time is of the essence.
I actually would like clarification. Are you going to waive the site plan, or are you going to require a site plan?
Going to require.
And an A3.
Yeah.
And I would ask that you to also address the sidewalk issue, just what your plan is, you file.
Okay, so I'm just confused. Are you on a site, lay it out for me, I'm a layman here.
Go ahead.
Dick has some.
Bill, I would suggest that they provide a site plan, but it be two-dimensional, and not go into all of the requirements that would otherwise be necessary.
When you say two-dimensional, what do you mean by that?
I mean, the elevations are not a critical issue here. I think that all they need to do is demonstrate how many parking spaces they have, and
That's in the
make some representation of what's required, and show if there's going to be any additional parking, where it is, and it complies dimensionally with the parking requirements.
Okay. I think that sounds
So does
good.
the board want to identify if there's particular areas in here that you're then waiving? In other words, you're not requiring a stormwater plan, you basically just want to see the site plan with the proposed parking tables, striped parking, delineated, any loading zones. And I heard, are you requiring an A3 at this point in time?
Yes.
Okay, an A3 is a public hearing. So as soon as that material is submitted, we can schedule a public hearing.
So you're basically looking for the site plan with the tally of all the parking
With a
spaces.
reschedule, yeah.
Well, and, you know, because you did this for the last
Yes, yeah,
for the
one,
plan.
is all the
With
specs
schedule,
on
with the table.
lots, what's your drive aisle, where are all the
We
spaces?
did it for Ralph's. Ralph
Yes.
Bakersfield.
Something that we can refer back to in the future, so it's just part of the record for that
Okay.
site.
Yeah.
But as far as the site plan, I mean, that's all part of the A3, as far as the site plan review goes. Do we want to tell them which part of the site plan criteria we want, or are we doing a full-blown site plan review?
I think we should do the full blown, and areas that you don't need to address, that, as some applications come in where the applicant does says no issue on, stormwater, whatever. But I think as a board, I'll go through site plan from A to Z. And the areas that you don't need to discuss, you don't need to discuss.
change,
Say
yeah.
no change.
It would, if we could just limit it, as one of your colleagues,
But that would just be the- I mean,
It would save us a lot of money and time.
He touched on a lot of he touched on was the A3. And the
I
parking
think the
determination.
issue here is the parking and whether or not it's in compliance. The requirements for a full site plan include detailed location of utilities and all sorts of other site features, and that's going to run up a pretty sizable bill. What needs, in my opinion, to be focused in on is the parking. To show the parking that dimensionally is in compliance.
I agree.
And to exclude the ones that are not in compliance.
Well, I would agree with you, the parking is the big issue here. You got the bylaw in front of you, I can take a look at it.
I mean, they have the plans, there's no additional plans required, because they have their plans all
Thing is,
submitted.
the main money piece that guidance should be provided is whether or not you expect to update a stormwater report, because that would cost more money. But the essential site plan information,
Hasn't changed.
they have that information.
You're not increasing the impervious area, and you're not relocating utility structures, so it just serves no purpose.
Plus, we're running up against time limits with our tenants if we don't get them open and operating within a certain time. And I can't tell you exactly what it is, I don't have the lease with me. we risk losing those tenants, so the time is of the essence for us.
Yes,
But
I mean.
for the applicant, the site plan that you do submit,
That's a big
you should
one.
call out the
It does
dimensions of the
Parking spaces.
aisles, the parking spaces, identify the loading zones. If you're intending to retain that consolidated dumpster area that you had on the Rite Aid plan that was required to be, show that, please, so that the board can look at the plan
Okay.
and look at your parking table and determine adequacy and make a finding. And that will be, I think that's what I'm hearing from the board.
Right.
Okay.
All right. It seems to me that A through E would need to be addressed.
Okay, so we could, would we need to vote tonight to waive F, G, H, I?
You don't have to vote tonight, but I think that you need to provide clear guidance to the applicant. When you vote on the site plan is when you would formally waive it.
So we're looking at essentially the layout, the site layout, and the adequacy of and assignment of spaces. Is it also the aisles and the
Yes.
circulation paths within the parking?
And that's B.
That's
So
B, yeah.
A through E would touch on the big stuff. Mayor, did you say you don't think the stormwater drainage plan is no melting? You don't think that needs to be addressed?
The applicant is saying they're not changing the impervious surface.
Okay.
And so therefore, theoretically, there would be no new material.
There's no grading
All right,
changes,
so
no stormwater changes.
So we're on the same page. I'll read to the board what I would propose we waive. And this would be F through I, so everybody knows what they are. And folks don't have to borrow them. F is the prevention and mitigation of adverse impacts on the town's resources, including without limitation of water supply, wastewater facilities, energy, and public works. Everybody agree with that? It can be waived?
Yes.
G is assurance of positive stormwater drainage and storm melt runoff from buildings, driveways, and from all parking and loading areas on the site, prevention of erosion, sedimentation, stormwater pollution, management problems of the site design, etc. Would that, everybody agree that's okay?
Yes.
All right. H is protection of natural and historic features, including minimizing the volume of cut and fill, number of removed trees, stone walls, the obstruction of scenic views from publicly accessible locations.
Yep.
That would be good too. And the last one would be minimizing a reasonable departure from the character and scale of buildings in the vicinity. That can be waived too, all right? So the areas we'd like you to address would be A, B, C, D, and E.
And are all the entrances to these new uses on the same side? You're not having any on the side, are you?
No one.
Yes, one, the lapel dry cleaner is on the side.
So these
That would have a new
face-
storefront
it's
that
like
would,
two storefronts that face the parking in the
Right.
front and then the dry cleaner space. So that's gonna bring a lot of traffic
That's
to
in
the
the
More
side of
traffic,
that-
yeah, the
to
side,
the
yes.
side of that building.
But
where
in a
right
way,
now-
arguably, you're spreading out the traffic
Yeah, no,
too,
it's
which
good.
is better.
It's spreading it out, definitely.
Yeah, I agree.
But it's definitely a different flow of traffic
Correct.
than has existed on the site until now.
Are they doing the cleaning on the site?
I believe, I'm not sure about that. I think most of it's offsite. I think it's offsite.
oh yeah, I don't know, I don't believe so.
Will you have that answer when you come?
Okay, we'll find that out.
That would be good.
If you'll need to park a number of, fleet trucks for the dry cleaner on site, the board would want to know that. And I suggest that you clarify with the building official if he wants any of the handicap spaces relocated closer to the new entrances.
Okay.
Because building code requires the spaces to be in particular locations. Mr. Clancy may require handicap spaces in closer proximity to your new entrances. Just double check with him and
Okay.
he'll provide you that guidance.
And we are fairly flexible in February, so you shouldn't have trouble getting in here.
Set the advertising on the public hearing. Do we have to have advertising before the
A
hearing?
special permit A3 is a public hearing, so typically once it's submitted, it's scheduled within 3 weeks. So when it walks in the door at that point, we'll be able to identify when the next hearing would
So we'll
be.
get you in as soon as you submit your stuff, post 3 weeks, because we have to advertise.
We'll get right on
Okay.
Okay.
it. All right, thank you.
All right, good luck.
All right, thank you.
Sir, do you have anything in the background you'd like to speak on this topic now? Just curious. Okay. Welcome to stay. We have another.
Your curiosity continues.
Yes. All right, so it's 9:10.
And what time was our other
Mr.
one?
Murphy was scheduled.
Let me see if he's,
Easy.
Way to manage the clock.
let me see if he's out there. Yeah, Walter, we were wrong.
Yeah, we were running.
To discuss the item so that I can advise.
Well, do you want
Or you want to
to,
take?
before we do that,
Take a
give us a couple minutes, do you have anything else you'd like to speak to us about?
I do not, except that I'll have paperwork to hand out to you tonight.
This came up at an earlier point. I'm trying to get it calibrated. How was that?
This issue by Peter? Well, my memory is, and Sarah has the best memory on the board, he came in about 2 years ago. And he came in and we asked him to do a couple improvements to the road. And I don't think they were ever done.
That's Katie Lacy's letter. It's in the back of our package.
So I was curious to hear from him why I just thought he didn't want to pursue it.
Now, the Permit Extension Act did carry this project forward. It added 4 more years onto the time frame.
Can you explain to me that?
Yeah, 'cause I didn't
This
see
is the
the
second
dates
time we've
didn't
seen this,
jive
Mary.
to me. Yeah.
The
The
permit-
automatic Permit Extension Act, what
The
is
Permit
that?
Extension Act, and I had a handout for you, and I'll scan it and email it to you. That was adopted due to the economic downturn.
Okay.
And basically, it said if you had a permit that was valid during X time frame, you automatically received 2 additional years. And it just acknowledged the fact that the economy was very sour and many projects were expiring. Now, what happened was that was approved and then it expired, and then the state looked around and said, the economy's still really bad, we're gonna add 2 more years onto that act, and it was retroactive.
Oh.
So there was a little gap between where the first one expired, it was '07 to '09, I think. Where the first one expired, the next 2 years was added on, it was retroactive. So it picked this project back up again, and the extension, though,
Is that between September 1st? Well, if you look at the little timeline that you gave us,
yeah,
it says September 1, 2009, the project expired, but this Permit Extension Act extended it for 2 years to September 2011, right?
right.
In November of 2011, we heard a request for extension.
Right,
And
and
it
that,
expired in September of 2011?
it did expire. You had heard a request for extension, and actually that should say September 2011 on the second sentence of that.
Right.
But you did hear a request for the extension. The applicant came to you and said, could you please give me an extension? And the planning board said, we want additional information, go out and get this.
That was in November of 2011.
Correct. But then in the meantime, that additional 2-year
Years
Permit
kicked
Extension Act got approved by the state, and it was retroactive. So it went back and kind of wiped that expiration off of,
September 1, 2011.
yeah. And then picked it back up, and that's what carries the project forward then to 2013.
Okay,
But
so
it's
it
still
expired
expired.
in September.
It expires September 1, 2013.
Passed.
This, yes.
And when was this road built? I mean, it was, I feel like it was before my,
2009.
It's been to,
I feel like it was even before then.
I was gonna think
Yes.
Before then.
I want to feel like this was already in existence before I started on the board. Am I right, Dick?
This was definitely in existence prior
so
to
it's had 8 years
2005,
to be exposed to.
But I've been on the board now for,
since 2000, no.
no, well, Dick says he was on the
We're
board.
going back 15 or 20 years.
Yeah.
I was
it's
gonna say
been a
15
binder
years.
for a substantial period of time, which the planning board acknowledged when you ordered an inspection report the last time it was before you. And to my knowledge, there's been some drainage improvements since that time, but there hasn't been any remedial paving work.
The other thing that's a concern in looking
Do you
at the...
recall how many lots there are off this roadway?
I believe that there's 8, is my belief.
Coming out here from the
Have
homeowners.
any of them been built on?
I don't think
Yeah,
so.
I think so.
I
No?
don't think they have been
None of
built
them
on.
have been built.
Oh, I thought there were people living there.
No, that's the other one that we discussed.
This is all open.
This is
So
open.
that's why we haven't heard about it.
As a matter of law, I looked it up, once the expiration date comes, the applicant has to refile. And I'd be willing to give you some grace, but September, now we're almost in February, I'm not sure what his intentions are with the site, so my feeling is if he wants to pursue it, he probably has to refile.
I agree.
I would agree, Bill. 2 years has gone by since we last asked for these drainage and binder course changes to be made to prevent further deterioration of the roadway. And in looking at it, I don't see that any of them have been done.
I mean, if there's an exceptional circumstance that he wanted to present with us tonight, I would have heard him out, but
So the determination of the board is that in accordance with law, a revision of subdivision application must be filed.
Yes, I think so.
would anybody agree with that?
Yes.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right. We gave him some extra time, it's almost 9:20.
And the extent of the
There's some.
reapplication would include not only the cul-de-sac paved areas, but there's also this drainage and easement that goes off to the east, which is Lot 4, that's huge, it's as big as the sub, I don't know.
I remember there was lots of discussion from abutters on drainage problems on this roadway near this site as it is, without, so I do think it's a complex site. It's not a, does that ring a bell for you?
My recollection is that it's a drainage ditch adjacent to the roadway.
That often
And
gets
it was
filled up.
always difficult to figure out how, who's going to be able to get the stormwater off the site.
Amazingly, we finished a lot earlier than I expected tonight, especially that we didn't have last week's meeting, so I'm making a motion to adjourn.
Second.
So moved, or whatever, voted on, yes.
Get the comments to Mary by February 6th if you can, and if that date doesn't work, you keep them coming in.